Welcome to Bound and Unraveled. My name is Christina. The idea for this first video is I'm going to vlog a few bookish days here in Cartagena. I've picked out 4 books for us to read together and some places to go along with them. And the first book that we're going to read together is Vivir para contarla, or Living to Tell the Tale by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is his autobiography, and I picked it out because I think it will be really cool to learn more about his life and how he was so shaped by this region in Colombia. So we're going to start this book today, and then this afternoon we're going to go on a walking tour of Cartagena that is inspired by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Then I have Los colombianos somos así, Colombians we are this way. It's a book by Eduardo Lora, who is an economist who kind of takes a statistical and economy-based view of Colombia, and he kind of analyzes, as far as I understand, the patterns that make Colombia the country that it is and that shape Colombian identity. So I think this will be really interesting. And then I have El infinito en un junco by Irene Vallejo. I think the English translation is Papyrus, the history of books in the ancient world. Just to read you something from the back, it says that it tracks the origins of books from how Egyptians discovered papyrus, and also the battlefields of Alexandria, Cleopatra's palaces, the first bookshops and workshops for manuscripts, and she also visits Sarajevo's library and subterranean labyrinth at Oxford, which sounds fascinating and right up my alley as a book lover. And then finally, this one can seem like the odd one out, but this is actually the inspiration for this video. This is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. It's, as far as I know, set in the Spanish Inquisition. And as I'm sure you know, Colombia was a Spanish colony, and actually Cartagena in particular was a really important city during the Spanish Inquisition. Hopefully this will be a good way to get an insight into the city and also read a few, I'm hoping, good books. So with that, let's dive in and read Gabriel Garcia Marquez's autobiography together. All right, I have 10 pages left in the second chapter. I'm at page 140. Just such a great way of giving it that quality of like storytelling, even in an autobiography. Totally imagine someone telling this story while sitting around like a campfire or something like that. There's just very little judgment, I guess is what I mean. And I find that really compelling, both in this and also in other things that I've read by him. And also the way he talks about himself, like he kind of presents himself, quite frankly, as an unreliable narrator, even as he's telling us his autobiography, and at points telling us like the truth is, or honestly this, but then he'll tell us a story, and at the end he'll be like, oh, and by the way, that was false because I wasn't alive then. Like that's a false memory. It's just kind of making me admire him as a writer more, I think, than when I read his fiction. And I find this with a lot of magical realism. It just feels a bit distant because it is so much narration with very little dialogue, and it all feels very much like from that omnipotent third person just telling you the things that people do. But I think for his autobiography, it really works. I'm gonna quickly get ready and then call the Uber and head out for the tour. I'm really excited. I'll check back in later and hopefully I'll still be able to capture some parts of the tour while I'm on it. So I'll talk to you soon.
Outside my window, is everything pale and cold? Can't seem to pick up my phone. It's been ringing all day long. Behind these clouds, I know the sun will be, but today's raining, so be patient with me. I'll be right. Somehow I must be somewhere the sky is blue. face. A face that wasn't even close to mine. I know I shouldn't be in love, but it's so hard to move on. You haven't changed, you stayed the same. But if you did, I'd still love you anyway.
Alright, I just got back from the tour. The tour was fantastic. Started at 4 p.m. and it was like super breezy. As far as Cartagena goes, not terrible heat. It was only about like 2.5 hours, so I felt like I got a lot out of it, but it wasn't too fatiguing. I did it with a group called Beyond Colombia, the free tour. Juliet was my tour guide. She was fantastic. It was just really a great compliment to the book. Something that the tour guide mentioned that I really found super interesting, and I wanted to kind of hear other people's thoughts on it. She mentioned that Gabriel Garcia Marquez, he talked about how to be inspired, he needed to come back to the Caribbean, specifically the Colombian Caribbean and the coast. And he said that all of us are kind of like ecosystem organisms, and that he would find that after a while of being away, he would like lose his energy, and that no matter all the places he lived, he pretty much always wrote about this region and about this coastal part of the country. And that once he would come back to Colombia, specifically to the coast, he could feel his whole body like get re-energized. And apparently he said that you could blindfold him and not tell him where you're going, but as soon as you would be like over the Caribbean, anywhere in the Caribbean, he would be able to feel it in his body. But that got me thinking, like, maybe there really is something in all of us that like our bodies just know. I mean, for me, it's not where I was born, but where you have those kind of original memories and where your sense of personhood was really shaped in those early developmental years. So I'm kind of curious if you've traveled or if you've lived in other places, there's something special that you feel in your body when you go back to the place where you were born or where you were when you were a little kid, or if you've moved away, have you found another place that's like, you're like, that is my soul place, even though I've never been here before I came here as an adult? Yeah, I'm curious. I'm gonna make myself some dinner, get into comfy clothes, do some like editing work for this video. Oh my gosh, Coco, my cat, is making her first appearance. And then I'm gonna get to reading again, but probably in bed. So, as is evident, I got a bit distracted this weekend and did not read as much as I was planning to. But I just got back from Pilates and showered, and it's about 5:15, and my whole body feels like absolute gelatin. So the plan is I'm gonna sit on this couch right here and read the rest of this book. I have about 2.5 chapters left, so quite a bit. I think it'll be like a couple hours. And then I'll hopefully give you my final thoughts, and we'll move on to our next one. Okay, we're done. Definitely, I would say that I liked the beginning and the end the most, and I felt like there was a lull in the middle. Especially during Gabo's university years, there were just so many different characters, and I get the sense that he was personally a bit lost at the time, and I think it shows. And some turbulent years of him like moving around and him being in and out of school and having definitely like a party life without a lot of direction. Once he started working as a reporter, I picked up again. Also, I was surprised because I thought that it would be a bit more evenly distributed in terms of its focus on different times in his life, and it's definitely focused on his youth. So he didn't actually start talking about living in Cartagena until page like 370. But yeah, reading about his time as a reporter and kind of seeing the origin stories of a lot of his famous work is really interesting. And I was really struck by how many times he worked on and wrote iterations or ancestors of 100 Years of Solitude. I'm glad that he includes that, honestly, because I think it's a good reminder that even people who are frankly geniuses like him usually have to practice, and that he kept working at it and kept trying and kept giving it all these different like births again and again. It's a really interesting story, I think, in and of itself. And I will say just finally, there were some discrepancies between some of the details that he writes of in this book of how things played out and what I was told by the tour guide during the tour I took on Friday. Not big things, just like little details. And I'm not at all an expert on Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I haven't really read a lot about his life. Like that's why I was interested in reading this. So I have no like judgment or verdict on that. I'll just note that. I think that there are some differences, but I'm not sure if it's things that he later talked about in interviews differently. I mean, I think I mentioned he also talks about himself as an unreliable narrator. I think I'll give it somewhere between like 3.5 and 4 stars because the beginning and the end are great. But there was definitely bits in the middle where I just kind of felt like I was trying to keep going but wasn't as engaged. I'm gonna probably start the next book in bed and talk to you guys tomorrow. Good morning. It is like 9:55 and we're gonna head out. It's a beautiful day. We're gonna go to the walled city, to a couple of bookshops, coffee shops, and potentially, if we're lucky, a library. And we're gonna bring this. I've read the first 2 chapters of 12. It's really interesting so far. It kind of validates different trends, and it's very cool to see them kind of like in black and white on a statistical level. So anyway, that's what we're gonna do. Let's do it. Hi, we're at home and I loved this book. Obviously, it's for a niche interest, so for anyone who has no ties to Colombia, I don't think that this book will be very interesting, but anyone out there who does have ties to Colombia, either you're Colombian, you live here, or whatever, this was such a great read. It actually exceeded my expectations. Eduardo Lora does an amazing job of really laying bare certain realities about the cultural, social, political construction of the country. And he comments on so many different things, but in a really accessible and easy to read way. Like it was honestly not a slog to get through this book. Overall, I just found it very illuminating and in some ways grim. Like it doesn't shy away obviously from any of the harsh realities, but I'll say that one of the parts that I liked the most was about different generations, and I think that's a hopeful aspect of the book. It kind of suggests and emphasizes that with respect to so many of those trends, we are improving with generations. Oh, and side note, it also talks about like happiness as relates to the country, and I found that whole thread really interesting. He does a good job of talking about why a lot of the myths about happiness are just that, and they're myths. Rambling a bit, but it was really good. Highly recommend. And I want my family members to read this so that we can discuss. I'm a bit tired and sweaty, so I'm gonna change into some house clothes, drink a lot of water, and give my eyes a reading break. And then probably start our next book in a couple hours later this evening. Okay. A reminder to also drink water. Bye. Hi, welcome to Wednesday. It's about 1:10 p.m. Started this book and I'm really liking it so far. I think it's the kind of book that's best enjoyed when you take your time. And by that I mean like having the time to sit down and engage with it and not be rushed to like get up or move around in a second. I can definitely see how if you're reading it kind of in little bursts throughout a workday or work week, it might not hit because it is very much meandering and has a lot of history in it and everything, but I'm really enjoying it as kind of some time to just sit down and read a book that's about books and appreciates the miracle that is reading. Anyway, we're gonna go to a tour of the castle this afternoon, which starts at 4, so we have almost 3 hours, and that tour is going to start in the neighborhood of Gethsemane. So we're going to go to a lunch/coffee shop place in that same neighborhood and just going to hang out and read. There's another one on my list that we might go to if we have time. So I will see you there.
I was lost in a city dream, and I was at home again beside the stream. Then you walked past me, and you saw me and smiled. I will never forget the first time when I saw you. I thought I lost my mind. Blue and faded was blown away and left behind. I hope you'll always be around, even if
home. Castle tour was fantastic. I did it again. It was with Beyond Colombia, this time with Jenny. I really enjoyed her tour. Her sense of humor was great and she made it very engaging. But I'm going to take a shower and get into PJs and do some editing work, and then afterwards get back into the book. Hi, happy Friday. For that book, it's definitely a case of right timing. I know for sure that in plenty of other circumstances, I wouldn't have really liked it, or I would have found it very slow and perhaps repetitive. The experience of sitting down and having long stretches of uninterrupted time to enjoy it suited the tone of the book. It does take a really interesting look at the history of reading, specifically in the European ancient world and in the Middle East as well. The author was speaking from her perspective as someone in Spain. You can feel her perspective is very clearly rooted there. And the reason I'm saying that is, like, for example, she in some ways kind of contributes to that narrative of oral tradition versus written tradition as a linear history and like evolution in some ways. And as much as I absolutely adore reading, I don't want to in any way assume that oral tradition is less rich than written storytelling. So anyway, that was last night, and then today I started The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, which will be our final book of this video, and I'm so excited to read. I am really more of a fiction person at heart, even though this video doesn't really show it. So as much as I've enjoyed the other books, it's definitely such a relief when I opened up the pages of this book and just was immediately swept into the story. And I'm already feeling things about the way that the protagonist is behaving. Right now, I really want to kind of like shake her around a little because she's making some choices that are frustrating, but that's okay. I think it's setting up an interesting plot. So I'm at chapter 10, and we're gonna head downtown to the Museum of the Inquisition and get some context on this whole time period that this is set in. Anyway, I will catch you there. Hi, we're home. Before I get all cozy and start reading again, just a quick No, from about the 40% mark. I am finding the main character, Lucia, frustrating. One of her main characteristics that we have been made to see over and over again is that she's a very intelligent character. But the thing is, you see her intelligence in the witticisms of her banter, but then it's like that completely evaporates in her actions. She's just so impulsive. And I'm like, why, girl, why would you do that? That's only going to backfire. That's only going to put you in a more precarious position. And at the beginning, I was like, okay, fine, she needs to do this to get the story to start. But where you're about 40% of the way in, and she just did something which is obviously going to, in some way, expose her to another character in a way that's a bit dangerous. And I'm just like, oh, it's just frustrating to keep reading about how she's so smart and everything, and then to see her do these things which are frankly foolish. I do really like other aspects of the way that she's being characterized and the tensions and relationships with the other main characters, in particular the person like teaching her how to leverage her magic. But just wanted to quickly say that. I'm hoping it won't keep frustrating me too much, and we're gonna keep going. Hello. I just finished The Familiar, and so I want to give you my final thoughts. First, I'll say that reading this after going to the museum for the Inquisition was very, very helpful for understanding the stakes that the characters were dealing with, and I'll say that I feel like Bardugo actually let them off light. The torture instruments and creativity of cruelty that was employed during the real historical era definitely exceeds what is mentioned in this book. And I think that that context contributed to, in some ways, my frustration with Lucia, the protagonist's choices, because it just felt very much like there were going to be clear consequences. So anyway, that's that. I'm going to start with my cons. One is that Lucia's character is older, like she's for the time in her later 20s, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. The whole time to me, she read like a much younger character, like more of a YA teenager, which made the age gap between her and San Angel, who is immortal, feel that much bigger. I would have liked for Lucia's character to have been aged up a bit to make their relationship of kind of being equals and their meeting each other being a meeting of equals feel a bit more real. And also, I think a lot of their scenes together were off the written page, and I would have liked to have more of them, because I think as the story evolves and they kind of get wound up more and more in each other's futures, to put it that way, it was hard to fully understand the investment that each of the characters had in the other, because so much of their history had taken place somewhere that we didn't go with them. And I just enjoyed their banter and their dynamics. I would have just liked to have more of that. And then I tend to struggle with like very political, like intrigue-based plots. But yeah, it lost me. I got confused on like what was happening and why, and then on the final flaw, and this is more of like a nitpicky one, but I felt like the magic system was not super solid, and there were definitely some flaws. Like, there's a scene where Lucia has just had her first hot bath, and she makes a point of noting that and being like, oh my god, you can't imagine what a big deal this is for me. I just had my first hot bath. But then later, she mentions at several points that she can just heat water whenever she wants. Why make a big deal of it on either end if you're not going to be consistent? Okay, all of that said, those are all the cons. I really enjoyed the reading experience. I mean, for me, Leigh Bardugo is just consistently a really great writer, and I appreciated that this story felt very different from any of her other work that I've read. It felt very unique and contained. I think it's a really interesting time, history, and period to be in, and I liked that it was a standalone and that there was like no dragging on of the story. I thought it had like a pretty satisfying ending. I mean, it's one of those where you just kind of have to go with it. Like, again, with the magic system, I don't fully understand what it is that happened, but I'm happy. Like, I closed the book and I was like, okay, good. And even though I had some qualms about the way that Bardugo built up the relationship between Lucia and Sant'Angel, I really liked the way that she built up the relationship between Lucia and Valentina and the whole character arc that she gave Valentina. That was a really cool journey for her to go on, especially as one of the main female characters. And I won't say more because it would spoil it, but I just appreciated what she did with that character. Overall, I would recommend, I think I'm gonna give this 3.75 stars. So yeah, that was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I'm going to end this video here. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye!